woman wants more from a man than he can provide, it can be dangerous.
Most people would never dream of killing. For these women, murder was the answer.
Could a mother make her son a murder weapon?
She primed him, she pointed him in the right direction, and he went off just like she expected.
A French beautician turns to butchery.
It was wrapped in plastic, and it was very bloody.
And a wartime hustler promises sex, but delivers torture.
In the context of the time, this is a really sensational murder.
For these deadly women, a relationship is a match made for murder. When a man with no enemies is murdered.
Everyone loves the guy. Just a country boy at heart.
In the most brutal fashion.
Neil was lying there, his face and head, I can only describe it as a bloody mess.
Everything points to one bizarre suspect.
This isn't a horseicide, but this is a homicide.
Summer 1993. In Lanesboro, Massachusetts, an idyllic farm is home to Neil Olson. A bachelor, he has no one to share the country life with until he meets Patricia Robinson.
This is Hannah.
Patricia was a divorced woman with 2 young children, and she met Neil Olson, and, well, he instantly fell in love with her.
36-year-old Neil doesn't waste time on a long courtship.
Will you marry me?
Yes, I will.
In the early days of the marriage, people said that Neil and Patricia seemed like 2 young kids in love, just 2 soulmates who had found each other.
Neil is soon not only a husband, but a full-time stepfather to Patricia's children.
Welcome. Good to see you. Come in. Hello, how are you, son?
She had been previously married and had 2 children, Amanda and Christopher. And the 2 of them raised them in Lanesboro.
So now that you're home, let's just say welcome to your new home.
I think for Neil, the relationship meant love and romance, and for Patricia, it meant financial security.
Oh, thanks, Mom. That's so cool. Thanks, Mom. Well, it's from the both of us.
Now we can keep track of you both.
She had a nice place to live. Her kids had a roof over their head.
Thank you. It's okay. You gotta turn it on.
Like many children, Christopher goes off the rails in his late teens.
I'm not doing this anymore.
Christopher goes out, he gets a girl pregnant, has a child, and he doesn't take care of the kid. He's a bum, basically. He doesn't want to work, doesn't want to go to school. All he wants to do is party, drink, and do drugs.
For hard-working Neil, it's behavior that won't be tolerated. He tries old-fashioned tough love to pull Christopher into line.
Neil would tell Christopher, take that dirt out of the basement and haul it out. And when he was done, he'd tell him, now haul all that dirt back into the basement.
No job, but I have a point to it.
You pick that up, or you're out of this house.
Neil's methods of disciplining Patricia's children were pretty harsh and pretty unreasonable.
You got me something to jerk off.
I've had it with you, boy. You couldn't even look after your own kid.
Christopher is starting to really hate Neil. Everything about Neil just rubs Christopher the wrong way.
You disgust me. I want you out of the house.
Good, I don't want to live here anymore.
Patricia doesn't argue with her husband, but secretly keeps giving her son money.
Christopher was destitute. He had no job. He was living out of his car.
It's not the only secret Patricia's keeping. She's up to her neck in debt.
She had a video rental store, and then after that, a restaurant. And neither one of them did well.
Patricia starts to do things behind Neil's back. Not pay this bill, not pay that bill. Fudge on the taxes a little bit. Her restaurant business is sinking. She owes this vendor, she owes that vendor. She's ciphering money from Neil from his sign business. She's taking money from here and putting it in here.
Soon, there is no more money to shuffle around, and the bank threatens to take their home.
Neil has all these animals, this big land, only a matter of years away from paying off his mortgage, and yet she was able to, in just a matter of years, sink them.
Neil is unaware of any problem until he is pulled over in a random police check.
A state police trooper discovered that all of the vehicles that the family had, there were 5 or 6 of them, were not registered, they were not insured, they were not inspected.
I just got pulled over and fined because my truck is out of registration.
Yeah, I've fallen behind on some of the payments, but I've been really busy. I'll sort it out, okay?
After about 10 years of marriage, not only was Patricia in fairly serious financial trouble, Neil didn't know it.
I said I was really busy. I'll get on to it, all right?
Yeah, well, do it immediately.
He was about to find out, and she did not want that to happen.
With her debts mounting, Patricia can't hide the problem much longer.
The closer he gets to figuring out exactly what's happened to all their money, that's when she starts leaning towards, gee, maybe Neil needs to go.
Patricia burdens her woes on the person she can trust the most, her son.
She knew he had a resentment for Neil,
We had an argument. He's becoming unbearable.
so she lied to her son, and she said Neil was beating her.
Christopher believes his mother's allegations of abuse.
She's a very manipulative person, capable of strong emotion, but I think that it's one of somebody who's an actor.
Everything will be fine.
Christopher, he starts thinking, you know what, maybe I should kill him for all he's done to us.
Christopher will soon prove how far a son will go for his mother's love. Patricia Olson's life is in turmoil. She is hiding huge debts from her husband, Neil, and spinning lies
Unbearable.
to get sympathy and help from her son, Christopher. She makes up one more outrageous story to fuel her son's anger.
You know what? You hit your daughter, you understand? Baby, understand? You hit your daughter.
Finally, she pulled the last pin and told Christopher that Neil, in fact, had hit his infant,
He hit your daughter. He hit your daughter. You
who his
understand?
estranged girlfriend had brought over to the house. And that was the last straw. We don't believe any of this was true.
January 9th, 2005. The family fighting will come to an end.
Neil is a guy of habit. She knows that he goes out to the barn every single night, 11 o'clock, to feed his horse, Hannah. And then he comes up to bed. It's the perfect opportunity.
A loyal son makes sure his family problems are a thing of the past.
And he just can't face them. He closes his eyes. He He just fires. Fires the weapon right in Neil's face.
Neil was lying there, his face and head a bloody mess. He had been shot 9 times in the head.
Christopher begins a bizarre plot to cover up his brutal crime.
But Christopher now has to make it look like the horse did it. Let's blame it on the horse. So he gets a pipe and he just starts jamming it into Neil's head and body, making a bloody mess. It's not a really good theory. It doesn't take a forensic expert to put A and B together that this guy was killed.
The following morning, like she always does, Patricia brings breakfast to Neil in the barn.
She took the sandwich in the bag and the coffee. And she says that she saw Neil, became upset, went back inside, made a frantic sounding 911 call.
No, he's not responding. They think he's dead.
District Attorney David Capeless is one of the first on the scene. He's immediately suspicious of Patricia's story.
Tell me, what happened?
When I woke up in the morning, he wasn't there, so I figured he was feeding the horse. And then I came down and brought breakfast to him, and then I saw what happened.
And where the bag was found on the sidewalk, you couldn't see into the stable to even see him. We theorized that she dropped the bag in the coffee, went back inside, and called up. They mentioned the pipe. I said, wait a minute. This is something else. I said, call the medical examiner's office. We're gonna have an autopsy.
The autopsy reveals the truth. 9 bullets are found in Neil Olson's skull.
Chris seems to have not considered the fact that a medical examiner would be doing x-rays and find the bullet in Neil's head.
This is a homicide. This isn't a horseicide.
But police still don't know who is behind the brutal slaying of this loved local man until they hear that Christopher is mouthing off at a hotel.
He opens up immediately, and right away they know that he is definitely not the mastermind.
He made some mention about his mother and about his mother wanting him to do this. From that point on, the investigation not only was into Christopher, but also this potential link with his mother.
Incredibly, Patricia claims she never heard a single shot.
Patricia's story is she had this enormous headache and she couldn't sleep that well, so she took a couple of sleeping pills and that she was completely out. That's cruel and it's evil.
Patricia is lying. Her story doesn't match the evidence.
Discovered her cell phone, in fact, had been activated. She'd gotten phone calls, and even after 11:30, that the phone had been utilized by calling up and checking to see if there were any messages.
21-year-old Christopher Robinson pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He receives life, but is eligible for parole in 15 years.
That sentence tells me the judge took sympathy on Christopher.
He all of a sudden had all this remorse. He was being haunted by these visions. I believe that Christopher was pushed into doing something that he didn't want to do.
May 23rd, 2006. Patricia Olson is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life behind bars with no parole.
Would she have done it herself? No. I don't think she had the gumption to do it, but she could push somebody else to do it.
She'll live out her days in the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, Framingham.
Patricia would be classified as an extreme narcissist. Everything's about her, and all the people in her lives are players. And it's a stage that she has created in order to get what she wants. My advice is don't marry Patricia Olson. You may end up dead.
East Mesa, Arizona. January 27th, 2000. It's 5 a.m., a strange time of day for a well-to-do woman to be dumping trash.
This delivery man just happened to see her, and he thought it was unusual. She was wearing high heels and a jumpsuit. So he took the step of writing down her license number.
Curiosity gets the better of the witness. What he finds will not only shock him, but the entire city.
The case was bizarre from the second it happened, and it got more and more bizarre as it went on.
In the early 90s, in Scottsdale, Arizona, French-born Valerie Pape is well known to the pampered ladies in town.
That's fine, Valerie.
Valerie Pape was a high society salon owner.
So I'm just going to place these onto your eyes, and then you will rest for 15 minutes, okay?
She was a very charming woman. She was a very, very smooth lady.
But 44-year-old Valerie has no one to share her success with. Until she catches the eye of bar owner 54-year-old Ira Pomerantz.
She was a woman of taste, definitely an attractive lady, and I think a lot of men would have been very glad to have met her. He was a little older than Valerie, and according to his family, he just sort of fell for her.
I see you drinking champagne.
Ira is well known in Phoenix as a successful entrepreneur.
I own a few restaurants. Cheers.
Valerie falls for his charm and money, and they soon marry.
They lived a glamorous life. They lived in the McCormick Ranch neighborhood in North Scottsdale. Very, very nice, the community. And it was a very large house. From the outside, looking in, people would think that they were wealthy.
Valerie prides herself on her appearance and spends exorbitantly to keep up with the latest fashions. But when her husband's business ventures start failing, Valerie keeps spending.
Spending money we don't have.
Need these things for my salon.
Why would you do that?
Valerie bears the brunt of her husband's troubles. The marriage turns violent.
You bitch! You can't talk to me like that.
Touch me! Don't touch
Everything
me!
you own belongs to me.
Go! You are useless!
You own belongs to me. You take that crap back. You take that back.
I hate you, you pig!
Damn bitch.
Get out!
More than one friend of Valerie's told police they had seen her bruised and battered from domestic violence. There was no question what was going on.
Valerie gets an old friend from France to come and stay with them. It doesn't help. It makes matters worse. Her husband's anger turns to jealousy.
Do you mind speaking in English?
This was an aggravation for Ira Pomerantz.
We were just talking about the little cafe that is...
To have a man living under the same roof with you and your wife. So certainly that didn't help.
Shared breakfast a lot, did you?
Her plan to protect herself has failed. Valerie decides to take more drastic action.
She actually took a class from the gentleman that taught her how to shoot.
Get your left hand and hold back. That's it.
You're gonna buy a gun, it's very smart to know how to handle the gun.
Straight down the barrel. That's beautiful. Whenever you're ready, you go for it. Okay.
The gentleman said that she was very poor at first, but that she improved pretty quickly.
Valerie Pape is in training for murder.
That's excellent. That's perfect.
In many of the cases where a woman kills her husband, she was desperately unhappy and saw no other way out.
But no one could imagine what this petite French beauty is capable of. January 23rd, 2000. Scottsdale, Arizona. Valerie Pape feels trapped in an abusive marriage.
Where the hell have you been?
At workplace.
There was a history of calls to the Scottsdale police. Scottsdale police had definitely been to their home.
You tell me where you've been, or I'm gonna bust you up so bad you'll never work in your salon again.
Touch me and I go to cops.
She no longer wants to be with her husband, but wants a more permanent solution than divorce.
I've had enough. I'm getting a divorce, and you're not getting anything. You hear me? Nothing.
Most people have ups and downs in their marriages, but would never dream of killing their spouse.
Valerie pumps 4 shots into the back of her 60-year-old husband.
Mr. Pomerantz pushed her too hard, and she killed him.
But taking his soul is not enough for Valerie. She wants to destroy his body.
It's not terribly surprising to me that Valerie shot and killed her abusive husband. What does confuse me is that then she cut him up.
Mr. Pomerantz was dismembered brutally. His body was basically destroyed piece by piece.
This body, it would be heavy. It would be difficult to disarticulate the bones and joints from one another. It would require a persistent amount of endurance.
For 4 days, Valerie keeps the body parts at home.
She had not planned how she was going to hide the body. Obviously, wherever the body was, there's going to be evidence, and the evidence could incriminate her.
Panicking, Valerie drives across town and tosses part of Ira's body away like trash.
You don't see people dismembered every day. You don't see people driving 30 or 40 miles from Scottsdale to discard a torso every day. So this was quite a case. This delivery man just happened to see her lifting this odd item out of her trunk early in the morning, and he thought it was unusual. She was wearing high heels and a jumpsuit. So he took the step of writing down her license number. They found poor Ira's torso sitting there in the dumpster.
Oh,
head, arms, and legs were all missing.
Battered women have been known to kill their husbands, to shoot them, but it's rare that they chop them up.
Thanks to the eagle-eyed delivery man, Valerie is soon tracked down.
The car was registered to Valerie Pape. They found blood in the house. The police found some receipts for saw blades that would have been a useful tool in dismembering someone.
Valerie Pape never stands trial. In 2002, she accepts a plea of second-degree murder. At her sentencing, the judge asks her to come clean and disclose where the rest of Ira's body is.
Judge Galati was very angry at Valerie Pape. He begged her, more or less, please tell us whatever happened to the head and the legs and the arms of Ira Pomerantz. And she refused to give it up.
Ira Pomerantz is still not properly laid to rest. Valerie Pape is sentenced to 16 years in the Arizona State Prison. She is eligible for parole in 2018.
I don't think Valerie Pape is a natural-born killer. I think she snapped.
Beauty may only be skin deep.
She was very attractive. She was tall and had red hair, and she's dressed well.
But when a man is fooled by a woman's looks,
Just show me experience. So they would use that to get money, and sometimes quite large sums of money from their victim.
he can lose everything, even his life.
It was just so senseless. It was so pointless.
Where's your money?
1938, Sydney, Australia. 18-year-old Jean Lee dreams of a perfect family.
There's 2 quid down the drain.
What? You're gambling and we've got a baby coming in less than a month?
Quit your gambling, woman.
But when she marries the wrong man, her life starts to take a tough path.
Get a job!
Shut up! You shut up!
She defied the family and married a 23-year-old wharf labourer. Family didn't approve, and he was pretty much a no-hoper.
I'll bash your head.
Out of all the boys in the world that Jean could have been involved with, she chose the baddest one.
Get out!
I'm coming back.
When Raymond walks out, he leaves Jean holding the baby.
Raymond!
She is bitter and destitute.
Being left as a single mother leaves her in financial stress. There's not, for example, welfare support in the way that we'd know it now. There's also social embarrassment. And she is probably feeling fairly alone.
After 3 years, Jean can't cope. She decides to leave daughter Jillian with Grandma.
Hi, Mum.
For good.
Mum, I need you to look after Jillian for me, okay?
You can't be serious.
Please do this for me. I can't cope.
You have to cope. You have to cope.
I
love.
can't, Mum, please. Just, she's better off with you, okay?
Her mother brings up the grandchild really as her own daughter.
The Second World War begins. Jean decides to take advantage of the influx of troops.
You have the arrival of hundreds of thousands of American servicemen into Sydney, where she lived. There were different opportunities to make money.
Cashing in on her good looks, she turns to prostitution.
Hey, Santa boy.
She was tall and had red hair, and she was very beautiful and used to wear lovely makeup and dressed well.
In just a few years, Jean Lee is a changed woman.
Her lifestyle shifts. She's drinking, she's associating with known criminals.
she takes a second job as a barmaid and meets another bad boy, 29-year-old Robert Clayton.
Robert Clayton is really the start of her association into more serious crime. And he's quite a skilled con man. He certainly has a bad temper and is fairly violent.
Would you like another one?
Tell you what, drinks are on me if you can choose which cup the coin is under.
Well, I'm gonna go to bed.
All right. Ready to do?
Like Jean, he is also a user of men, and they hit it off.
Jean was on a pattern of hooking up with guys who were not good for her.
I'm Jane.
Hey, Jim, I'm Robert.
Robert teaches her the tricks of his trade. They become partners in crime.
He could be described as her pimp. She works with him over the next few years in a series of scams or cons.
Haven't seen you before.
I'm a new boy in town.
They perfect a sex extortion scam known as the Badger Game. Jean puts her good looks to bad use.
Jean, looking very glamorous, would strike up a conversation with a man.
She'll entice him with a few more drinks, lure him back to her room, get him in a compromising position.
Do you have this much fun in Sydney?
Clayton would bust into the room and would demand money.
What the bloody hell's going on here? This is my bedroom. This is my wife.
Clayton often pretended he was the wronged husband.
Robert! Robert, you get a
Shut up.
So what they were doing was really a form, I suppose, of blackmail.
What do you want?
I've got a wife and kids to feed.
Take this.
What do you got?
Please don't tell my wife, please.
What else you got?
This is a scam.
Shut up.
Get him out of here.
Come on.
If Jean had any self-respect from her childhood, any traces of it were completely gone when she started playing the Badger Game.
So what's happening?
November 1949. Jean and Robert travel south to Melbourne and team up with fellow swindler Norman Andrews.
She goes up.
The trio plan to play the Badger Game on cashed-up gamblers in the city for the country's biggest horse race.
Spring Carnival is the big racing event held in Melbourne, and there's lots and lots of people with lots and lots of money, and very attractive for swindlers.
You've got to find the right bloke, you know? Not too small, not too big, pocket full of money. Yeah, once you get them in there, you go, exactly right, mate, exactly right.
73-year-old William Pop Kent seems like the perfect target.
Here he is.
Pop William Kent, he was an SP bookie and he owned a boarding house, and he'd pull out a roll of notes and peel them off and buy everyone a drink. He was a pretty obvious mark for the Badger Game.
Good evening. I'm Jean. Interesting day.
Pop loves the women and falls for Jean's charms.
Have you had a good day, Pop?
He was very, very keen and interested. He wasn't married. He didn't have anyone to make any excuses to.
This man is a funny man.
It's the bomb.
Last drinks, everyone.
When the bar closes, Pop wants to carry on drinking with his new admirer.
Well, why don't you come back to my place and we'll finish up, okay?
Sounds good to me.
But Jean Lee has other plans.
To think that a woman would take part in something as evil and as violent and as awful as that was just unimaginable.
November 7th, 1949, Melbourne, Australia. Con artist Jean Lee has lured unsuspecting bookmaker William Pop Kent back to his home.
You all right, Pops? Yeah, good luck.
She plans to steal his cash in a sex scam called the Badger Game.
The intention is that she'll get him in a compromising position, get money from him.
All right, Pops, we gotta go.
Her fellow crooks, Robert Clayton and Norman Andrews, leave so Jean can get down to business.
Jean Lee was trying to get his money out of his trouser pocket.
When William Kent caught Jean picking his pocket, he called her a lying whore and told her to get out of his house.
After years of abuse at the hands of men, Pop Kent's words are the final straw.
Call me a whore.
Year upon year of demeaning and immoral behavior took its toll on Jean.
I couldn't get the money the sweet way, so we're gonna have to do him over.
Her accomplices return to a Badger Game gone wrong.
They believe he's hidden some of his betting winnings somewhere in the room. They weren't going to give up until he handed over the money.
Jean instigated it. She took the laces out of his shoes and tied his thumbs together.
No money.
Hold still, Pop! Where's the rest of the money?
A very brutal scene follows where they are in the room for some hours, drinking, torturing Pop Kent to try and see where he's hidden money.
Pop, you're not making this easy for yourself.
Andrews produced a small penknife and slashed his face and his nose with it.
Pops! Come on, mate.
Clayton lit a cigarette and butted it out on the man's face.
Where's your money, Pop?
But William is a tough old guy and bravely stands his ground. If he does have more cash, he's not giving it up.
Your money!
It's a fatal decision.
Just finish him off!
Jean Lee is thirsty for blood.
Last chance, Pop!
While he was on the ground, Jean was gloating over this and kicking him, and the poor old man had absolutely no chance.
Go on, stab him! 99 Pops.
Bye, Pops.
Thanks, man, Pops.
What begins as a sex scam for money ends hours later with the murder of 73-year-old William Pop Kent. The killers never find any hidden money.
99 Pops!
99 Pops!
9 Pops! 99 Pops!
They said, "See you, Pop. Lovely, thanks very much for having us. Good night, sleep tight." Off they went, as if to say, well, when we left, he was just fine.
Their arrogance will be their downfall.
Cheers, cheers.
They had acknowledged other people within the boarding house, so they were never going to get away with it. Within 24 hours, they were found in a room, still covered in Pop's blood.
All three face the death penalty. But in Australia at the time, it is rare to execute a woman.
No woman had been hanged in Victoria, in Melbourne, for almost 60 years. So the idea of a woman being sentenced to death is really almost outside living memory. And that also adds to the sensational nature of the crime.
Jean Lee thinks her sex will spare her from the hangman's noose, and she confesses.
Her confession, done to protect Robert Clayton, was on the grounds that she thought as a woman she would be treated more leniently.
But it is a brutal murder of a much-loved old man.
There's a long and very dramatic trial. This attracts huge amounts of media attention. Because having a woman involved, it is shocking.
Jean Lee's confession backfires. She is found guilty of murder and sentenced to death.
She moaned when the verdicts were handed down, and she believed that a woman wouldn't be sentenced to death.
February 19th, 1951. 31-year-old Jean Lee is hanged at Pentridge Prison, Melbourne, Australia.
She liked being a bad girl. The only person that put that hangman's noose around Jean's neck was Jean.
2 hours later, Robert Clayton and Norman Andrews suffer the same fate. In a twist, Jean's death helps keep future deadly Australian women alive.
Her execution ultimately serves to forward the cause against the death penalty.
There was a general consensus of opinion that hanging Jean Lee was extreme and that her sentence should have been reduced to life imprisonment.
Jean Lee goes down in history as the last woman to be hanged in Australia.
Jean was not a natural-born killer. She did not have an abusive upbringing. But she chose a path that led her to murder.
These deadly women wanted more from life than their men could provide. Patricia Olson used her own son to execute her husband. Valerie Pape dismembered and dumped her unwanted husband like trash. And Jean Lee lured an old man to his torturous death. These deadly women believed they had a match made for murder.